Yeah, so I guess now it is live streaming. Yeah, I think we will start a few minutes after that because I think everyone have to check if you're working well technically. So if you're opening this video now, please wait for a few minutes. Yeah, okay, yeah, I think it works now, at least for myself. Cool. Okay, my live stream is working well, so I think I will start now. Hello, everyone. Hi to all the audience who are watching the live stream online. I'm Yo-Yo. I'm from the Hong Kong community in Norway. So actually, we have an exhibition, physical exhibition in the Bergen Public Library these days, but very unfortunately, the event cancelled somehow, and also the venue is being closed down because of the changing coronavirus restrictions. So we have to make this sudden change, and sorry for the inconvenience. So let me get started. So today's program is called Eyewitness, as you could see from the title. Today we have Chris, the gentleman next to my screen. So Chris was in Hong Kong last year, so he had experienced the protests by himself. So we are very pleased to invite him to share his feeling and experience with us today. So before that, maybe I would do a very quick introduction for the protest because maybe some audience know nothing about the protest. So let me have a quick recap of the protest. So our protests in Hong Kong began in June last year. So it's basically because Hong Kong people were very against the extradition bill that proposed by the government. So after that, since the protest started, we have been protesting for a long time until now. But the form and the scale of the protest is of course very different from the beginning, because now the government tried to oppress the assembly and the rally and every forms of public events, both due to the coronavirus restriction and also because of the national security law restriction. So we can't explain everything here due to the time limit, but I think this could give you a picture, like a full picture about what was happened so far. So, okay, so enough for my introduction. So maybe I will pass the time to Chris and let him to share the experience. So, Chris, maybe it's your time.
Yes. All right. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris. As Yo-Yo said, I was in Hong Kong from August 2019 until July 2020. And during that time, I got involved in the Hong Kong democracy movement in a couple of different ways. And I got to experience and see things I never thought I would ever see or experience. And all of the things that happened down there in Hong Kong, they can be very unreal to understand, especially for us living in a very safe environment in Norway. And I was a bit unsure on how to do my telling, but I think it's easy to start with how it all began, because I spent I arrived there as an exchange student for the University of Bergen, actually. And before, when I applied, I only knew I knew that Hong Kong was a city that had been under British rule for a long, long time, and then it had been handed back or something some long time ago. I didn't really know. But of course, I also knew a little bit about the umbrella movement uh, because it had been very publicized online and in the media. So I had a faint idea about Hong Kong. And then, of course, going there for a year of exchange, I started researching and I really got into the history and all of this. And then, of course, during the summer, the protests kicked off. And I saw that, and of course, I was a little bit worried. Like, if things are going to be chaotic, will this affect me or my travels and all of this? And friends and family, even some of them advised me to cancel the entire thing. But of course, I could not do that. I had to go. And actually, the week before my flight down, there was a protest where the protesters gathered at the Hong Kong International Airport and occupied their entire thing. At first, to have signs warning people that were arriving about the abuses that were happening, but then also shutting down the entire airport later in an act of protests. And I was worried that they were gonna, do the same next week, which was something they tried to plan, but it didn't work out, which was actually maybe for the best. And of course, eventually I arrived in Hong Kong. And at first, I was very confused and hot and dizzy all the time because of the heat and the jet lag. But I soon got to see that it was a lovely and beautiful city. And the people at my university, Hong Kong Baptist University, by the way, in Kowloon area, they were very accepting and welcoming. And I felt very, very much a part of the local environment immediately. And the very, very first protest-related thing I was a part of was very confusing to me the first time because I saw there was a paper note on the door, one on a door that said "Protest 101, class in protesting." I was like, "What is this? Do they teach people how to protest in universities?" And of course, it wasn't an official class, but it was some students and also a nurse who had who gathered a bunch of people and told them about basic first aid, usually basically, as well as smart tricks to avoid getting caught, like wear black clothes, use coins on the metro station, don't use your own. There's a specific card they have in Hong Kong called an octopus card, which you charge up with money, and you can use this for the metro, to shop in the 7-Eleven. You can use it basically anywhere, but they track it. And there have been many instances of people being tracked via the octopus card and cameras, and they have been arrested later because they were seen in black, wearing black from the cameras, and then later the police tracked them down and arrested them. There were many such cases, unfortunately. And most of the time, the course, they spoke in Cantonese, which obviously I didn't understand. But the people saw me sitting there. They're only foreigner, and so some of them were very nice and translated most of it to me and talked to me a lot about it afterwards. So that was fun. Also very interesting in a weird way because that was the first thing I saw. I hadn't been to the streets or seen any of it, so I just knew about it from the news. And the first thing I saw was a bunch of nice people sitting in a room talking about how to be clever and how to do first aid. It was very much a grassroots kind of thing, and in the end, also it symbolizes the movement very well because it wasn't organized by any specific leader. It was just students that noticed some of their fellow protesters didn't really know how to be safe in the movement, and so they set it up just like that. A couple of them with no specific, didn't have funding or anything. They just asked a couple of people, a nurse, okay, let's put this together, and they did it, and it happened. And that's how almost all of the Hong Kong movement has arisen. A bunch of passionate people who are willing to do almost anything, and they do it together, and it has changed the world. It's very impressive. And further after that, when it was closing in on Mid-Autumn Festival, there was a group of people sitting around a table folding small paper lanterns with the protest slogans on them. And I sat down with them and I asked, hey, what are you guys doing? And that was just me being curious. And then I was immediately welcomed into the entire circle. They shared a lot of information with me and they told me many things, and they immediately treated me as a friend. There was no suspicion or hostility at all, just immediately, hey, this is what we're doing. And then I asked if I could help. And of course, they were super happy that I would like to help. And so that was actually my first act of protest in Hong Kong, folding nice paper lanterns that we hung up in the school. A school which, by the way, was absolutely covered in protest material and pictures and the walkways, even statues hanging up. I mean, the artwork that has been hanging up in Hong Kong all over the city, the schools. It is amazing. It's a lot of things can be said about the Hong Kong movement, but art is maybe one of its defining features. It's quite magnificent, and it goes from posters and statues and rhymes, poems, songs. It's quite inspiring to see everything that can be made when people care about something so deeply. And well, further on, my first actual time seeing a protest, I was very curious because my first mentality going to Hong Kong was I study social sciences, and I have been politically active before with human rights and such. So of course I knew that I would go see some of these protests, but I had the mentality of this is not my city, not my place. I shouldn't go and yeah, it was not for me to do. Was my thoughts, my thinking. And then I went late in the night. I heard from some friends that there was a protest in the Mong Kok district. This was very early, I think 10th, 11th, 12th of September. I can't really remember. I hadn't been there for a long time. But I went over there to have a look, and it was fairly late in the night. And what I saw was, what I later came to know was because I just saw a bunch of people, some of them young people dressed entirely in black, what we would call black blocs, frontliners, or also just regular protesters. But also a bunch of young people, old people, people in regular clothes, men, women, all kinds of people just walking around in the streets in the middle of the road. There was debris in a fair amount of places, some small barricades, but most of the time just people milling around waiting. And I later learned that this is because around 8 or 9 in the evening on long protest days, the police will usually have a shift change, so that they will harass you from the early morning. In the evening, they have a change of shifts, and you have sometimes even an entire hour of just peace. You walk around, people chant, and in this hour, it's always the most peaceful because people don't destroy things or create any distractions for the police. They just stand and sing, chant their opinions, and try to get the message across. And of course, I was there also when the police started to arrive, and that's where it got very, very interesting to me, because I was just standing there trying to talk to some people, and they were a bit. One of them asked me if I was a journalist, but I said no, I'm just here to look. And then people started shouting and talking, and some started running because some of the scouts. Oh yeah, there are scouts, specific scouts who walk around the different districts, and they use apps and even a police map that everyone can see, that tells you where the police are, how many there are of them, how are they moving, what kind of police, do they have a water cannon with them, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, they had reported that the police was coming to this area. And so I was like, oh shit, what do I do? And then this amazing lady, she just comes up to me and says, oh, the police are coming, you have to go. And it's like, oh yeah, go. And then she says, wait, you have to have this. And she just gives me a gas mask, an expensive gas mask, out of nowhere. I didn't even ask for it, and I try to put it on, but it's kind of difficult with the straps for the first time. And so she helps me put it on, and then points at me where to go. And I go into a side street, and so incredibly generous. She didn't even ask at all, which is something has been demonstrated again and again and again to me. The incredible generosity and empathy shown by protesters and people who are not even part of the protest, but just the people of Hong Kong. How much they will include and help and go so much out of their way to help you. But yeah, so I ran into the side streets. And previous to this, the only protest images and descriptions I had seen was in the media, international and local Norwegian ones. And well, it's portrayed like it's a battle. They say fierce battles in Hong Kong or fierce battles in Chile between the police and protesters. And it is not a battle. And I saw this incredibly clearly. There were a bunch of young kids and some adults, and maybe 200-300 of them in the streets. And then what I saw was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of policemen charging down the road with armored cars and shooting tear gas and pepper spray. And there was no battle at all. It was a clearing of the streets. And I was in the side street from the main road where the protesters were. And the protesters ran away like 20 seconds. But the train of police coming down, it took minutes for them to pass. There were so many of them. And I continued to see that. There were very few times that we could actually see a fight. Most of the time it was a game of cat and mouse, where the protesters would be in a place, the police would come and clear everybody out, and that would be it. There are no battles. In the media, they will show an image on one side with a protester clad in black, and he throws a cocktail, and in the other you will have a policeman firing a tear gas canister, and they make it seem like it's equal, like they have a fighting chance, but they do not at all. We almost never did, and the few times we did, it almost always ended badly. Like sometimes when people have been shot in Hong Kong, young people by the police, it's because the police have been underpowered, and they have fallen away from their groups out of their safety. And that's the consequence. The second the protesters have an upper hand, they get killed because the police can be so desperate and so scared. Yes. And after that scene with the police, I was shocked, of course, and very, how do you say, distracted. So it was so intense, and to just see so many people in basically stormtrooper uniforms charge past and be violent and shoot at people with tear gas, and the way they arrest people, it is insane. They would beat them with their sticks and make them fall to the ground and beat them so much that they really couldn't get up, and then they would put handcuffs on them so they wouldn't cause any more trouble. And so I went home very, very conflicted and thinking, shit, this is insane. And it really did affect my next weeks. And so I decided, well, I can go to a protest. I can go there and I can, because the protests are mainly about having as many people as possible. Like in Hong Kong, they had a 2 million people march. They had over 1 million more times. And that's what we need. We need bodies. We need people to go there and show their discontent. That's the main important thing. So I'll go there. I'll go there as a person because it just didn't sit right with me seeing this violence, seeing what happened, and it made it very real for me because when you're on the other side of the world and you see these images of a protester with a Molotov cocktail and a police officer with a tear gas gun, it doesn't seem real. It just seems like people fighting on the other side of the world. But just the same as if you see someone in the street getting beaten up by the police or other people, you know that it's wrong and you want to help. And when I saw that it was right in front of me, like I tried not thinking about it. It's like, oh, it's not your thing. But whenever I would just go other places with my friends or explore Hong Kong and try and have fun, it's always there in the back of my mind. Just a couple of miles away from where I'm having fun, there are young people getting beaten up just for expressing their views. And I think it's very easy for anyone then to care, and as they should. And it also reminds me that even though we are very, very far away, conflicts anywhere, especially authoritarian and oppression of peoples, it affects us all. We are all people, no matter where we are. Yeah, and I think that is one of the things that will always stick with me. Like, I've seen oppression firsthand. I've seen incredible violence put on by the state from a place that technically is on the other side of the world to me. And I know that now and forever, if I'm here in Norway and I see on the TV protesters getting beaten up, whether it's Egypt, Hong Kong, America, Sweden, wherever it is, it's real. It is people who care deeply, people who are passionate about their freedoms, about the safety of others. And I think we should all care a little bit more about those, to try and help in whatever ways we can. So anyways, later on I went to protest very peacefully. I was always my intention. I would never want to be a violent person. By nature, I am not violent, and my upbringing is always that protests need to be peaceful. That is how you get the message across, because, you know, we've all heard about Gandhi in our schools. He must be the best example, right? But what I learned during this march, it was on the 29th of September, and it started in Causeway Bay, and I went to the government headquarters in Central. And it was incredibly peaceful. I met, this is actually lovely. I met a group of what we call silver hair protesters, basically older protesters, people who are above 60, 50. And they have an advantage of, they didn't really have to care as much about their identities. They wouldn't wear masks to the protests often. And they knew the police wouldn't be as violent to them. And I mean, the things I've seen older protesters do, like I've seen one time I saw an old woman who could barely walk. She had like this kind of walking thing, and there was a line of police across the road, and the protesters were having the front line on the other side, and she just walked right in the middle of everything, walked up to the police and started yelling at them and telling them so many bad things. I do lay low mo, which is a very bad phrase in Cantonese, just right in their face. And what are the police gonna do? It's an old lady. They can't push her. They can't shoot her with tear gas. So eventually, some people came from the street and dragged her away, because, you know, safety. And there are many, many such examples of this. The silver hairs really are an incredible group of people that have done a lot for the protests. But yeah, I met a group of these silver hairs, and I was just there, standing in the middle of all of these people. I had no idea what was going on, what to do. I don't know, then this was fairly early in the afternoon, like 2 o'clock. So I was just standing there looking lost, but knew that at some point people are going to march. Yeah, also, all of this information I got from Telegram, which was a very confusing app for me, because most of the information is written in Cantonese, which I know a little bit, but I did not know anything at all at the time. Even now, I know extremely little. But all of the most of the information is written in Cantonese there. So I got very, very, very good at Google translating immediately, and I had special apps just for translating. And I knew that some phrases were mistranslated, but by experience, I knew that it meant kind of this or kind of this, and I would recognize some of the signs, the characters. So basically, Telegram and somewhat overhearing, because most of the protests I would go to, I would go alone with my own information because I didn't speak too much to other people in the university about it. It was for some reason I can't explain that choice even now. But yeah, I met these. I was standing there in the crowd, and this man named also Chris actually. He looks at me, sees that I'm all alone, looking very confused, and he waves me over. And he introduces me to his group of protester friends. And this is just, he is an extremely social man with a large network. And he organized a group of over 30 people to, at this point, they were about 10. And every time the ones who could, they would come. And they would go to the protests, and afterwards they would have dinners and talk about everything. But he saw me, and he waved me over and said, "Yeah, are you coming to the protest? You're a foreigner. Oh, amazing. Thank you so much, blah, blah, blah." And then we walked together. And later I would actually join some of the members for a naming ceremony in Yunlong, and they would invite us to dinners. And again, the inclusivity, and they shared so much of their lives. And I'm part of some very strange family photos now that I hope people will be confused about in the future. The march started, and it was, as I had thought, extremely peaceful. There were black bloc protesters standing on the streets and the corners, making sure that things were okay, and people watching out for the police. We knew the police were around, or people knew. I didn't know at that time. I was just marching with a crowd, and really nothing happened. People marched. It was people chanted. They were singing, and there was at some point they told me to put up my umbrella because there was a helicopter overhead, and they didn't want people to be seen by the cameras. So immediately I could just see umbrellas as a roof going all over thousands and thousands of people. I don't know the official number, but I think this march, they said something about 500,000-600,000, a lot. Not the not the biggest one by far, but still quite a lot. That is also a thing that I wish everyone can at some point in their life be a part of. Being part of such a large crowd, knowing that you're standing among millions with shared goals and ideas and feelings, and all of you are singing, chanting, and fighting for something that you truly believe in, and just being parts of that, such a unity. It's every single time it will give me goosebumps, and feeling that power in the people, and knowing that you're on the right side of what is good. You're on the right side of history. It's a powerful thing. Well, the march went on, and as we got to the government headquarters, things got to go very, very badly. And I didn't even know how it happened, but suddenly I was right in the middle of the front line, because I wasn't really paying attention. I was just walking. And suddenly there was tear gas everywhere, and we're in front of the government headquarters. And I don't know if you have been tear gassed, but it is a terrible, terrible feeling of basically you can't breathe, everything hurts, and it's very easy to panic, to just run away. Yeah, I ran away from that area for a moment. Then I thought, what's going on? I want to go closer and have a look. What does it look like there? And then I saw the cohesion and the cooperation of the frontline protesters, because the main goal actually of the frontline protesters, it is not to hurt or damage the police. It's not to fight, like I've explained before. It is because you have incredible amounts of regular protesters, sometimes civilians as well, and the police will shoot tear gas, rubber bullets, pepper spray, whatever, and they have water cannons that can seriously injure people. So the frontliners, they will create a wall, a shield, a front line to slow down the police so the others can evacuate and create safety nets. So that is the main task, I think, at least, for the frontliners, to protect the other protesters, which they do very, very well. And in return, later, when the frontliners need to hide, they will they will run. They will help them They will smuggle them in their cars. They will take them away. Sometimes they will make I don't know how to describe it, but like a huge turtle of umbrellas where people dressed in black, even right in front of the police or cameras, they can go inside this large turtle of dozens of umbrellas, and they can change their clothes and put on civilian clothes. And then when you do that, you change your clothes and you hold an umbrella for a while, so it's not suspicious that you come right out. And then after a while, you just change. Someone picks up your umbrella, and that way everyone can go away from there safely. Yeah, and that also is a strategy. I don't know who came up with it or how it happened, but I've been in many such umbrellas, and it's always a very inspiring and nice thing. It's very cool. Oh, let me just have a sip of water.
Yeah, thank you so much for your detail sharing. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. And truly, there are from the months of, well, especially from October 1st to January. Because October 1st was the National Day of China, and I from the 1st and 29th to middle of January, I would go 2 to 5 times a week to protests, and the stories really are almost endless, and there are so many instances of courage and cohesion and beautiful things to describe. It's almost impossible, so I'll try and limit it to some things. And of course, we'll have questions later if you want to know some specific things. But how it further progressed was that I saw how much people cared, and I got to know individual protesters, and I saw the beauty of it. And I think the way I work is that if I think something is good, and I'll be there, and I'll try and help with it. And it might be stupid, but I don't have too many limits on what to do. So at first I was a protest, and I was there, and then I was chanting. Then somebody hands me a poster, and I hold the poster. Of course, there's nothing wrong with holding a poster. And then eventually I would see someone struggling to build like the walls, or to make or what is it called? The barricades. Yeah, struggling to build the barricades. I was like, well, I have hands, and it's just lifting a pallet or taking apart one of the roadside fences. I can do this, and it progressed like that. And suddenly, someone had given me a helmet. I started wearing black to the protest so I wouldn't be recognized. I just, from Telegram and from speaking, I would just pick up the techniques and get more and more involved. And suddenly, I was there throwing back tear gas canisters shot at us by police and holding up shields and doing things that seem frankly impossible to me right now. Like the other day, I was sitting at a cafe with a friend, just eating like a yogurt, and had some very very nice coffee. And as I'm sitting there in one of the most peaceful countries on earth, and just enjoying life in that way, I had a small flashback to one of the protests where we're being shot at with rubber bullets and paintball bullets with pepper spray in them, and just running from the police. I was like, huh, how can something that absurd exist in the same world where I'm enjoying a nice yogurt with a friend? And it absolutely can. And even now, sometimes I think I could have been imagining it all because it's so far fetched. And of course, that has made me realize that that's how it is for everyone. They can't imagine the violence in other places, really. Like, they know that it's happening, and they know technically what it is that someone is tear gassed or shot or kidnapped by their governments. They know that it's a thing. But of course, you can't know about it. Even when I was there in the middle of it a year later, I almost can't believe it because it's so far away and it's such an extreme thing. But it is real, incredibly real. And that is very, very important to remember and try and keep in mind, even though something is happening far, far away to other people, people who are not like you. It is incredibly real, and the pain that it can cause and that it does cause, it is incredible. Yeah. I think for me, one of the highlights of the protesting career was must be the siege at Polytechnic University. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but I can give a brief recap where it started in the middle of November with the police assaulting and sieging CUHK, Chinese University of Hong Kong, where they attacked the school because they suspected that there was a lot of protesters there with a lot of equipment for protesting. And also because students at the school were blocking the highway in a sort of strike. And that lasted 2 days, and many, many people were arrested. And we don't have time for it here, but I really recommend Googling and searching YouTube for documentaries about siege of Chinese University of Hong Kong and siege of Polytechnic University. But what happened in Polytechnic University was after CUHK, many of the universities in Hong Kong, including mine, set up basically fortresses. They would put up walls around all the entrances. They would have people checking for student IDs at the entrances there were. They would have donations from all over the city, like we would call them parents. Parents were the people of the protests who they would not always go to the streets. They would not be frontliners, maybe because they feared for their jobs or they didn't have the health or maybe their families, whatever reasons they had that they couldn't go to the streets, they would support in other ways. They would provide evacuation because the police would often patrol the metros and buses after protests. So private people would come and pick them up. The parents, they provide money for legal assistance in case of arrests. They provide clothing. They provide equipment. Basically, all the logistics. Anything they need, people will post it in the Telegram groups, and someone will provide. And I know personally people who have spent like well up to 100,000 Hong Kong dollars just in food, equipment, clothes, and there are many more, many that have done much, much more than that as well. Indeed, the generosity of the Hong Kong protesters is boundless. But Polytechnic University was one of the universities that also set up a fortress like this. And between Polytechnic University and an area called Hong Ham, there's a walkway and a bridge that goes over the Cross Harbour Tunnel, an extremely important thoroughfare for traffic in the country. And so protesters inside PolyU, they started blocking this from the footway and university with debris and fire bombs so that they tried to instigate a general strike in the city, preventing people to go from work, basically stopping the entire city from functioning. This, of course, the police did not like at all. So they set up a cordon around PolyU, Polytechnic University, and they attacked it heavily, extremely heavily. And so the call went out on Telegram saying that they need people in PolyU. They're being attacked, and it's incredibly crucial. Much in the same way it had been in CU just a few days before, and people were very inspired by this. So thousands flooded to PolyU to help, and for the first few days, it was a very inspiring thing. I arrived there on the Saturday, first Saturday of the siege, and I managed to leave on Monday. So I was there for about 3 days, which is lucky because the siege ended up lasting for 13 days with nobody being allowed to leave without sneaking out or being arrested voluntarily. And the scary thing was that there on Sunday night, the police announced that anyone caught inside the Polytechnic University could be charged with rioting. And rioting is an old draconic law from the British era that is outdated. It's silly to have in any kind of modern legal system at all. But basically, if I or you are in an area where that someone, the police or the law, whoever designated at the time, says that this is a riot, you can get up to 10 years of prison. So what they said to every single person inside the university, including journalists, medics, cooks that were making food voluntarily for the protesters, is that you can get up to 10 years in prison for being a journalist. That is doesn't have to. It's not very difficult to imagine why that is a terrible, terrible thing for a police force to do. And well, for the first days, there was very fierce, extremely fierce fights, and that actually I saw many times. They were fighting, not actually like hand to hand with the police, but it was pushing back and forth. And at some point, we even managed to light a police armored truck on fire, which was a large victory there. It's strange just to have such a small thing, one car being lit on fire, and the entire university cheered. It was strange. But the main part of it was outside the main entrance, called A Core, and I spent a lot of time out there. Well, most of the night for me it was just 3 days of going back and forth between the front lines, going inside for a small break, get some water, maybe get a tiny amount of food or cigarettes, and then just going back up because there was an intense amount of things happening. Oh yeah, just to illustrate the absurdity of everything, there's a scene that I will never ever forget, because the water cannons the Hong Kong police force use, often they will have the water cannons, they shoot blue water, like dye, so that you will be painted, and then later they can recognize you if you get away from the scene. It was also pepper water, like pepper spray in the water. It hurts extremely and it makes you sneeze. But after one particularly heavy charge by the police outside, I went back in as I was very, very tired and a bit shocked, to be honest. It was very violent. And then I come back inside and I see lined up against the wall about 20 almost completely naked guys standing in their underwear, covered in blue paint from head to toe, and just two medics standing there with a hose spraying them down. They're just bouncing up and down because the water is so cold. And it was so ridiculous because they are in incredible pain because the pepper water it's bad. But also naked and bouncing up and down, while a medic who is standing there kind of relaxed because there's been so many of them that just, this is what I do. Strange things. And again, there are hundreds of little stories just from PolyU alone. And another one I would like to tell is a little bit after we had been given the announcement that we would all be arrested for rioting. There was a very somber mood. Before that, people would be laughing in the break rooms or in the meeting rooms where we had sat, and in the cafeteria, which actually is amazing because they had piles of food and equipment which had been labeled and sorted by people and also donated. And again, no leadership at all. It'll just come in, people have taken it upon them to sort it and said, oh, this needs to be done, so it's done. And people were volunteered to work in the kitchens and clean. And actually, the food was delicious. And there's actually a very famous protester, long hair chef, I think his name is. And he works at a very famous protest cafe in Hong Kong, restaurants. And he was there voluntarily, and he refused to leave the college even after everything went very bad. But there was a very summer mood, and I was sitting in the cafeteria with some friends that I knew from my university, and it was completely silent. during the night that kind of happened. It was around 1 o'clock after midnight. No one in the entire room, hundreds of people in one large cafeteria, and pretty much no one speaking. And then one of the guys, one of the few good protest friends I made at my university, he says his girlfriend is going to be very mad at him. And I ask him why. And he says, "Oh, my T-shirts, it got ruined. She gave it to me for my birthday." I said, "Oh, wait, it's your birthday?" He said, "Yes, today." And I said, "Oh, no way!" And me and the people around, we start singing "Happy Birthday" for him, and the entire room join us, and we have laughter and show him. We give him a cupcake that somebody found. It was great. It was a small moment. And then, of course, a few minutes later, obviously, they started charging it outside again. So we all had to run and get shot at by tear gas again. But we had that small moment. And I've seen that so many times in the protests. Like, even in the middle of the worst shit, there can be something fun. People will have some small things happening, or someone will trip while building a barricade, and we will laugh. Oh, but also, of course, help each other, or people will start singing, or something strange will happen. And it goes from terrible violence and fright to fun and happy in the blink of an eye. The Hong Kong people really have that gift for finding happiness and making the best of it. Well, and eventually, as things got very bad in the university, people started to escape. And how I escaped, I was fortunate enough not to be arrested leaving the university. I was able to sneak out. It's a very long and strange story, but I managed to sneak out along with another person. And we also managed to tell people inside about that same entrance route. So we got over 20 people out through that route before the police shut it down. So that was fantastic. But I can tell you it was extremely lucky, which is, again, nothing I have had again and again. And also, on this time, I have to thank simply put, the color of my skin. So many times I've been able to sneak past police or convince them that, oh, I'm just an American tourist. And they've let me past, even when I've had illegal things in my backpack or on my person. They just let me past. And I've been incredibly fortunate to be able to use that. But it also has made me feel very guilty, which again has led me to help people cross borders, which has been very useful. If I go and talk like a friend casually to another protester, because I am foreign, the police will just let us pass. So thank God that the Hong Kong police are racist and ignorant. So let's see further. Again, many stories every week, containing many of them. For me, maybe also a very memorable moment was on New Year's, which I, of course, spent in the streets, since having fun apparently wasn't important anymore. Which is also something that I was caught by surprise by, how much I actually came to care about Hong Kong, because I have, like I told you earlier, I have been politically in part of political activism before, but small, like an important hobby, like something I care about, but I will dedicate a certain amount of my time, but not too much. But when it came to this, somehow, because of the way I was treated, not just by my fellow protesters, but also by the police and the government, to see how little they cared, to see the violence they were willing to commit against their people to satisfy Beijing. It was the feelings it evokes in you. It is almost insane. And how much I was willing to do. Like, there were days where I would get up at 7, 8 to do morning actions, and I would be in the street, maybe go home to get some more clothes, because I would change clothes so many times to get away from the police, then go back out again, and I would have maybe a quick meal in the police shift late in the evening, and then go to bed at 12:01, and then do the same thing the next day. And I would do that for weeks, and almost never did it occur to me that maybe this is not good, maybe I should not do this. It was even getting up in the middle of the night to do something, of course, there's no question. And it's made me understand a lot about when I see conflicts abroad and think about in general, people caring so much that this is something that I can do. And I know that I'm not an extreme person with an insane passion or anything. That means that everyone has the capacity for that kind of caring. And maybe it just takes being exposed to it in a further way to activate that. I know that for every single time I got tear gassed or shot at by rubber bullets, I felt more, and I wanted to do more. I wanted to help more. So that oppression, it physically, mentally changes you, I believe, to further resist, which is again the mistake of the Hong Kong government and police. For every violence they commit, they create a stronger resistance. Yeah. But anyways, New Year's. We had been attacked and chased by the police all across the city the entire day. And right before midnight, I was standing, I think it was in Yamate. It's an area in Kowloon, close to Mongkok, a very populous area, middle of the city. And the police, again, they were chasing us all over. And then the most incredible thing happened. Because there were no people on the streets. They've been chasing it. They've been driving up and down the main street with the water cannons and armored trucks and police. So there were no people standing in the main street. But then suddenly the police stopped coming back like 5 minutes before midnight. And just in a couple of minutes, thousands and thousands of people flooded the main streets and started singing and chanting. And at the exact stroke of midnight, everyone started cheering. And someone had somehow got a hold of fireworks. There's like one singular rocket that shot up, and everyone cheered like crazy for that. And that was amazing, just this small moment, because they'd canceled the New York fireworks. New York. The New Year's fireworks. So this was the only fireworks we had there. And that was amazing. And the people were cheering and hugging, and it was a very touching moment. And then, of course, 7 minutes into the new year, the police charged back and hit us harder than they did previously that day, and we all got terribly tear gassed. But the terrible Hong Kong police, they are terrible, and they've committed many atrocities. There are many lives at their hands. But one thing they did do was they gave us 10 minutes to celebrate New Year's. I don't know if it was on purpose or not, but I think it was. I think they let us have 10 minutes to have some New Year's celebrations before they started hitting us again. So one of the few positive things they've done for me. Let's see. Of course, later on, when the corona started happening, the government used that as a very strong excuse with a gathering ban to prevent protests. So it was very, very difficult to get organized from mid-January on. But we still did. And instead of the very, very large masses, there would be small events where people held hands or stood a certain distance apart, or would be in malls and just singing and chanting for a little bit until the police came and kicked us out. So it would be small protests, but scattered. So we all knew what was still going on. And of course, the media was reporting things like crazy, and on the chat rooms, people were very active. And so the movement was very, very much alive, just silent on the streets for a while because of the corona. And then, of course, later on, when the summer approached, the China announced that they would be, how do you say, office with security agents in Hong Kong, in Causeway Bay. And these would be mainland Chinese people who would be under no one's, how do you say, leadership. They would operate in secret, and they didn't have to listen to the Hong Kong police or follow the rules in that way. They would do their own thing, basically a secret police working and arresting anyone they wanted for any reason they could make up. Like, one example is a man was arrested for holding a balloon in a protest. He was doing nothing but holding a balloon. It was a yellow balloon, of course, but imagine that, being arrested for holding a balloon and facing years in prison, possibly. It's a strange time in Hong Kong. And this was recent, I think, in August. But yeah, the national security law protests that kicked off were, of course, very large. It really roused the population again to go to the streets, and we had some very large protests. But one thing that happened was that the police had changed tactics during the winter, and they hit extremely hard, and they basically in any way prevented what is guaranteed to the Hong Kong people in the basic law that was made for as basically a constitution, as the rights for peaceful gathering. And they made it impossible. They put up police whenever there was a protest planned. The police would stand in all the metro stations and they would check the bags of young people, and they would suppress almost any gathering at all, which of course made it very difficult for the Hong Kong people to do anything at all, but we still did. There were many protests, large protests, and people faced large, very long prison times and extreme police violence. But like I saw again and again, they, of course, they cared, but the bravery they showed was amazing. They would go up to the police saying that you can be arrested for the national security law, and they would not move. They would still show up and they would still fight. I saw old people just going right up to the police and yelling at them, even when they said and had seen others, even of the same age, being arrested for the national security law violations. They still kept going. And even up until my very last, second to last day was the last protest I attended in Hong Kong before I had to go back because of visa issues. And even now to this day, there are still people sometimes meeting, sometimes having. Of course, the gatherings are much, much smaller because of corona restrictions and national security law police being very, very strict. But there are still small things happening. But now the protests have taken on a more, how do you say, international and online kind of spectrum, where, for example, like we are doing here in Norway, to have exhibitions and spread information to create a sort of net for Hong Kong to be safe in another way. We can't go to the streets, so we must do something else. And it is working in some ways. For example, many countries have, like Australia, New Zealand, Canada, and others that I can't remember at the moment, have ceased their Hong Kong extradition plans, and they've also offered the political asylum, which many people have already taken them up on, so that the Hong Kong protesters can go to these countries and be safe. And you know, the UK, they extended their citizenship plan, so that it's easier for Hong Kong people to come to the UK and work and live safe from the regime. But of course, anyone who knows about Hong Kong knows that the city has a very strict divide between poor and rich. And unfortunately, the people who can afford to use these opportunities, they usually, like, if most of the people who have been arrested are students, regular students, and most of them do not come from rich families. So if they are facing 10 years in prison, they most likely can't afford the ticket or whatever smuggling methods they need to get out. And even if they could get out, how would they survive? They would not have the funds necessary to live in England while receiving their citizenship. So, which is why we need to do more to convince people and governments to increase their efforts to further condemn the actions of China and the Hong Kong governments. And there are many things. This recent week, police have arrested several journalists for various reasons. Journalists from other side, from the, of course, not from the government newspapers or the pro-government newspapers, for various reasons, none of them legitimate, I believe. They have also arrested several pro-democracy politicians for, again, illegitimate reasons that we don't have enough time to get into. As well as, for example, if you have heard about the 12, which was a group of political refugees from Hong Kong who tried to flee on a speedboat to Taiwan. And Taiwan has been a popular political refuge for a while for the Hong Kong protesters. And on the way, they were intercepted by the Chinese, in Hong Kong waters, they were intercepted by the Chinese Navy, or no, the Coast Patrol? Something like this, yeah. And also there, the government lied immediately and said that they had not been assisting with Chinese Navy or Coast Guard. But it did come out later that they had been tracking the boat and handing information over. And now the 12 the 12 individuals arrested by the Coast Guard are unheard of. We don't know exactly where they are. We think we know where they are, but they haven't been able to talk to their families. They have been appointed their own lawyers, and they're in China. And the Chinese legal system is, well, it's not the best. It is very much intended to serve the regime. So these 12, they have a very uncertain future ahead of them, and hopefully we will receive more news from them later. I think I've spoken as much as I can speak. There are, again, many hundreds of stories and things to tell about Hong Kong and the protests happening there, but my mind seems to be a blank. So if you have any questions for me.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you so much, Chris. I'm happy that you cover lots of little stories or the little role in the protest, because I think today why we have to do this sharing is because we understand that from the global news, usually the whole picture is very abstract and vague, I would say, because usually the news would only show the violent scenes and like the most exciting moment for the audience and the viewers, but no one can understand some tiny little bit of the protest, like you mentioned, the parents and also the silver hair, that's the elderly group. So I guess these two groups is already like very fascinating to those who are not so familiar with the protest. And also maybe I can also add one more role, that is some citizens, they focus on writing letters to those who are arrested already in the prison, because we all understand that if they are already arrested and they are very like empty in jail, then people have to keep writing to these people so that to make sure they don't feel like being left or being forgotten by the whole society. That's really important to keep the protest continue and to sustain in the long term, because I would also say it's quite frustrating these days because of the security law and also the like all kinds of restriction due to the coronavirus. And of course, the government always use the restriction as an excuse rather than the real reason of the control. Because I can explain a bit why, because we can't have the legislative council election, but at the same time, in the coming December, we can have the huge scale book fair. As usual, just like every year, we have a book fair in Hong Kong, huge scale. Many people would go and attend. And then we can still have this to happen as usual, but we can't have the election. So why? It's really interesting to understand that. Yeah. So I'm not sure if there's anyone who left some comment. Let me see. Okay, I see one question here. That's from Anna. Do you manage to keep in touch with your Hong Kong friends these days?
Ooh, yeah, I keep in touch with a lot of them. I talk and send messages, not as much as I would like to, because life is quite busy up here in Norway. But I keep in touch. I video call sometimes and send some messages and updates and pictures of what life is like.
Yeah.
Keep in contact with them.
Yeah, indeed. Yes, I think, of course, communication is still possible, but I think everyone or most of us self-censoring ourselves, knowing that maybe we are under certain surveillance, so that we can't actually say whatever we want to say on social media or in some private chat. So that's become really hard for Hong Kong people and also actually for other people because if some of you understand that actually the security law is applied to anyone in the world, that sounds really ridiculous, but it's true. So even though you are not Hong Kong people, you may somehow be influenced by this law. So it's really tricky for everyone in the world.
Yeah, definitely. If you, as a Norwegian citizen, say something terrible, or as like imagine you're a local politician or a celebrity and you say something very bad about China, or not even very bad, just a little bit bad, and then you have to land in Hong Kong or Beijing for a middle landing before going somewhere else, and they have recorded maybe what you said online or somewhere else, and they can arrest you using the national security law. And that's a legal possibility, unfortunately, now in Hong Kong and China.
Yes. And I also see another question here from David. So he asked you, did you manage to find time for your study too? Because it sounds like you are doing a full-time protester. Um, yeah, and maybe I can also further add a question. It's like, how did you decide that balance, or can you do you think that balance is important? Because like personally, I understand that at that moment you won't think about the balance anymore. So yeah, you may share a bit.
Well, regarding the schoolwork, I actually somehow managed to do all of my schoolwork and pass with actually surprisingly very good grades. So, but I can also say that that was not a priority. Most of my assignments were handed in very late, and one of them wasn't handed in at all. So it wasn't a priority. I put that down and just did whatever I could. But I attended most of the classes. But of course, mid-November, the university I was attending was also barricaded and became a fortress like PolyU and CUHK. But we were only attacked once in the middle of the night. Like the police showed up and they shot 2 or 3 tear gas canisters and then they drove away. So we didn't have a large crisis. But the school was shut down and we had online learning the rest of the semester. And I think that helped a lot because the teachers, they understood that it was a difficult situation. So I think they gave us a bit of leniency when it came to grades. Like I handed in one of my assignments in January, well after the semester was ended, but my professor accepted it and approved of it. Yeah. So also when it comes to the violence, of course, all violence should be taken out of politics, and in protest, you should be peaceful. But what happened in Hong Kong and this is also a learning moment for me because it's very easy to condemn protesters when you see them on the news and you just see that they're violent and they're throwing bricks and firebombs and all that. But in Hong Kong, they had peaceful protest, they had millions of people in the streets peacefully, without violence at all, saying that this is wrong. We don't want what the government is doing. And what the government was doing was an extradition treaty between Hong Kong and China, which would allow China to extradite anyone they wanted, which is a problem because Hong Kong has been a refuge place for Chinese activists for a long time. It's been a safe haven for many people to speak out against China without facing fear of facing repercussions. Well, too large repercussions. Things have still happened. Like, for example, you are still, we're not right now, but up until this year, now Hong Kong was the only place inside of China that was still allowed, as well as Macau, but that was allowed to commemorate the Tiananmen Square massacre on the 4th of June. We still had it this 4th of June. But yeah, there was a lot of very, very peaceful protests. Even though people were shot by tear gas, in the beginning, people would just step away and would not do anything violent. And people tried the non-violent option for a long, long time. But that didn't work. And of course, when you're facing oppression and the stranglehold on the people and the freedoms gets tighter and tighter, people will get more desperate. And when the violence started and the protesters started fighting back and started changing the city and using sometimes extreme violence, it worked. The extradition treaty was cancelled. Of course, it escalated and it turned into a very large mess, and who knows what's going to happen now. But I see where the violence comes from, and it is unadvisable. It shouldn't be, but if it has to, it has to. And sometimes it is the only option.
Yeah, indeed. Because when I'm in Norway, sometimes when I try to explain the situation about Hong Kong to my friends, maybe some of them, they will think that, you start to use violence, so you people are getting bad, and they will change their attitude towards Hong Kong protester immediately, because of course we don't want to see any violence. But whenever this kind of situation happened, I would try to say we have to recognize the primary source of the violence, because the Hong Kong government actually didn't ever listen to the people. So, and they also escalate the violence that they are using, and almost endorse the police brutality. So that's why people just get more and more radical towards all happenings.
Yeah, well, that's something I also want to mention, is that the vast majority of times I've seen violence on the streets, it was started by the police.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it would be peaceful protesters just walking, and then even in approved marches that the police had said, yes, this is legal, you can have this march. And then in the middle of the march, they would just suddenly start shooting tear gas at the people in the front of the march, or in the middle from the side streets. That is the vast majority of cases. And that was surprising to me, because usually you think that the protesters start the violence, but in Hong Kong, this was not the case at all. And what I've also seen with my own eyes was specifically one time when it was a peaceful march, and as we were walking past a branch of a bank, I can't remember, but it was a pro-government bank, which made it often a target for the protesters. It was peaceful, nothing was happening, and then out of nowhere, some black blocs started smashing the windows and destroying the store. And at first, immediately, people in the crowd started shouting at them, "Oh, don't do that, don't do that." But then some other black bloc protesters started going up to them, pushing them and pulling them and stopping them. And when they got overwhelmed, the protesters who started the destruction of the building, they ran towards the police barricades and behind them, and they were welcomed. They were undercover police. And that I saw with my own eyes. And there have been many cases that has been documented and seen and filmed where the police has been undercover as protesters and started this, and that gives the police an excuse to attack the main crowd, to stop it. And that is subversion by the police, and it is completely illegitimate. And it's cowardly and shameful tactic where they know that the protest is a good thing, but they have to stop it. It's a terrible thing.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, because I think starting from the September or October, there are so many plainclothes police on the street, and they, as you said, they try to pretend to be the protester and create the violence so that people can react. Yeah, so that's how it was during that time. Yeah, so let me see if we have other comments. And if you haven't dropped your comments, you can feel free to do so now, just to remind everyone. While we are waiting, maybe I can also ask a question. So, when I'm in Norway, I'm always being asked by, then what can I do for Hong Kong? Because I want to help, but how can I help? Do you have any suggestions or like practical suggestions?
Ooh.
All of us here listening to this live.
That's a difficult question because there is always something you can do. There is always things. The main thing right now comes to awareness. So tell your friends about it. Watch documentaries on YouTube and share them to your friends and family, because people are very unaware and ignorant about specifically what direction it has been going. And also in general, the most practical thing you can probably do is avoid products from China in as big ways you can. Like if you buy clothes, see that it's manufactured elsewhere. Don't buy the phone, how's it called, Huawei. And just in general, don't use apps or products from China. TikTok, for example, is a app that has been found some very strange things ethically with the potential spyware. Don't use TikTok. Don't support that. And whenever you hear about atrocities committed in China, be aware of it. Like the Uyghurs, the Muslim population that's been basically committing a slow genocide over time with cultural eradication. And contact, if you call your local politicians or send them an email, or even your prime minister or president, and just ask, hey, what is our country's stance, or what is our counties, what do we do to help with Hong Kong, or what is your stance? And be aware when you're voting, what kind of stance do they have towards China? Are they very placating, or are they willing to stand up? Because what is required now is multinational cooperation against the tyranny of China, because they have a lot of international influence. But as we see now, there are many countries, even cities, that are standing up to China and saying no when they have demands. And yeah, I think that would be the best awareness, and politically as much as we can.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, because like I think when we are so far away from Hong Kong now, you and I, and many of us, we are very easy to say that, oh, I feel like I can do nothing, and yeah, I support you, but sorry, I can't help. But actually, there are so many practical ways that you can do and to change a bit. Sometimes it's just like imagine climate change. You may like develop your habits of recycling or helping just a bit. Even that is such a small action, but I think it will help somehow in the future and contribute bit by bit and change the landscape of the world. It sounds really naive, but after a year, more than a year of the protests, I think many Hong Kong people can only have this belief for themselves and for the world. It is impossible for only us to do the everything. Everyone in the world may have to contribute a bit. Yeah, and I also got a question from my friend. Let me see. I'm checking. Yes, so he wants to ask you that how the Hong Kong protest experience affect you, like affect your life, and yeah, maybe yeah, how it was life changing, I think.
Hmm.
Or maybe will you have the other way or the other direction of planning your future ahead because of the experience?
Yeah. Wow. That's quite a question.
Yeah, indeed.
Well, it changed. It's kind of hard to say because it happened over such a long time. And how do we know who we are as people right at the moment? We only know what's happening with us and our emotions right now. But I think that the experience changed me tremendously. Made me become more aware of injustice and knowing and wishing to change things more. And oof, that's a lot actually.
Yeah, I think so. It's a big question. So maybe you.
Yeah, but I definitely, for one, I want to go back to Hong Kong in
Mm,
some way, if that is possible in the future, to live there and potentially help further out there as well in different roles, if I can. And it made me see, well, it made me believe in people more. Because
mm,
from Norway, people can be very passive here, because we have a good government, and in general, things will just be okay. Like no matter who it is that's leading us, it's okay. So no one's gonna die.
yes.
Yeah, and
Very promising.
yeah, exactly. But now I was having seen how much people can care and how much can happen, like how you can change not just Hong Kong but the world by going into the streets with people who care about something
Yeah.
and
Mm,
just seeing the power of the people. And it's made me understand other things in history as well. Like I can imagine the French storming of the Bastille. When I've seen the Hong Kong people we've charged the police, I can see how all the energy and the emotions, and it's made me more understanding of others as well in some way. I can see there's so many people of different backgrounds that I was exposed to. Like I could be in the street and I could be standing next to a 40-year-old builder, and on the other side was a 17-year-old schoolgirl, and I could talk to them and we could help each other and we can understand each other. And extremely different people, but in the end we wanted the same things and we could be together. And yeah, and I think it's made me a bit more cautious as well, in some ways, like just knowing that whatever things that can happen, like in the beginning of the protests I would be very uncareful, careless, but that was mostly due to ignorance. But now that I saw the injuries and the legal effects and the psychological effects that can be caused by partaking in these things, a little bit more cautious, but as well as maybe also the other way, things got kind of crazy.
hmm. And yes, we have one last question from the comment section. Yeah, sorry for people that may have to go because we are doing a little bit overrun, but I hope we can answer this last question. So, do you know if there are a lot of young people who suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder after this long time fighting fighting the authorities?
That's a very interesting question. because already in the middle of the protests, there were psychologists internationally and in Hong Kong that were worried and had started asking young people about, and also people of all ages in Hong Kong, to assess their mental health. And they found a worrying amount of people, I can't remember the exact, but it was a high percentage of the people in Hong Kong who had PTSD-like symptoms. And many people that I have met and that I have seen who are changed, especially the ones who have been in prison. The way I'm not a psychologist, I can't diagnose PTSD, but I definitely know that people I've seen have been changed. They have become different people, more silent and stressed. And I know some people who have been on the run for months, not on the run, they're in hiding. And I met some of them, and I could tell that they were very subdued. They had visible fear in their personalities. And for example, in Polyu, during the last days of the siege, the people who were stuck in there, they were extremely antisocial. They didn't trust anyone. They didn't talk, and they were under extreme psychological stress. And knowing, because PTSD is a complex issue, and it can arise from falling down the stairs and breaking your leg. I can give you PTSD. Being in a car crash can give you PTSD. And I was fortunate. I was never seriously injured or hurt. It doesn't have to be that either. You don't have to be hurt. It can be just watching terrible things can give you PTSD. And with the amount of people and the amount of things that just me, the things I have seen, can be able to create a lot of trauma. So I believe sincerely that very many Hong Kong people will struggle mentally, not just from PTSD, but other things due to the protests here.
Yes, and I think this question is really relevant to the time now because it's like overall the Hong Kong society is quite silent for many things because we are simply being oppressed by the government. So we are not allowed to do this and that. And people get more and more like hiding themselves. And they are also afraid of doing many things now. So it's really a big concern for the psychological effects that they had come across. Yeah, so I think that's the end of our sharing because we have talked about many things. Maybe some of them are a bit fragmentary, but I hope that the viewers who were joining us today can gain more knowledge about the protests and can keep following our news because that's really important and meaningful to Hong Kong people who keep fighting for their future and for their freedom. That's very basic human rights that we deserve and many people should deserve. So I'm not going to talk too many things now, but one last advertisement for the coming event because our exhibition is being like suspend because the venue won't open, I guess. So we need to communicate with the library, but we will still have the online events next Saturday. That's the 14th of November. So if no matter where you are, in Norway, in Bergen, or in other countries, cities, you are please feel free to join us. And in case we can't meet very soon in real life, I still hope that you can message us to like Hong Kong community in Norway, the Facebook page, or email us for any concern that you want to talk about. We are happy to talk about the protests and also our freedom movement. It really means a lot because the person-to-person communication is really important for us and for anyone. So thank you so much for everyone. Hope to see you in person very soon. Yeah, have a good weekend. Bye bye. Bye.